Hello, I'm Marcel Benavides, and today we'll be discussing protesting. So, protesting, you may be thinking, what is it? Well, according to the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, it's defined as a complaint or objection against an idea, an act, or a way of doing things. Well, this definition is very much in line with what I believe to be the most common vision of protest. When we think of protest, we think of, the people along the lines of Martin Luther King, Cesar Chavez, and Mahatma Gandhi. Uh, I believe protesting is somewhat of a primordial behavior in humans due to the fact that it's in our nature to want something that is not given to us. Things such as food, water, and sleep are all things that we need, so we do whatever it takes to obtain them. The same could be said about inequality and the like. They're not necessarily needs for us to survive, but however, they are needs, and humans definitely have desires and will act on obtaining those desires and fulfilling that need. Another example of this being an ingrained behavior is protesting is seen throughout different countries, cultures, and various different people. As you can see in these pictures, several of them are in Asian cultures, Asian countries, and even the March on Washington is shown. And it has been since the beginning of time. Maybe not necessarily organized protests, but protests nonetheless. Today I'm going to be discussing three specific protesting movements, those being the feminism movement, the anti-war movement, and the LGBTQ movement. So to start off the discussion, I'm going to start with the feminism movement, more specifically what they call the second wave feminism movement, which is the movement which arose within the 1960s and 70s. It was very similar to the first wave feminism movement earlier in the decade, or in the century, but, more specifically, they wanted reproductive freedom as far as being able to, the availability of birth control at the time, abortion rights. They wanted also education reform for women, kind of changing what they could and could not do. They also wanted to redefine the roles of women. As you can see here, the famous Rosie the Riveter poster wanted to redefine the roles of women in America. Well, the movement really took a huge momentum shift when the woman on the screen, Betty Friedan, released her book, The Feminine Mystique. Basically, what the book stated was a very much middle-class stance on the issues plaguing a middle-class feminist. Became one of the most popular books at the time by an American, which prompted various protests to take place over the decade all across the country. And they saw a lot of success in it. They were able to make headway with closing the wage gap between males and females that were working the same jobs or close to the same jobs. They were able to redefine women's roles in the workplace, women able to, find education to be doctors and to be scientists and to be politicians, as opposed to them being cast in just the nurse's role, the aide role, or the teacher's role. Definitely, due to these protests, women were able to make breakthroughs in places that women were not welcomed before or prior to this movement happening. The next protest movement I'm going to discuss is the LGBTQ movement. This movement shares a lot of similarities with the feminist movement. One being in the sense of the demographics of the movement. With the feminist movement, it was primarily women, but men were feminists. Even children, if they wanted equality for women, they wanted equality for women, and they would support it. It's the same thing with the LGBTQ movement. It's a wide variety of people who were, lesbian, gay, bi, trans, things of that nature. It didn't matter what your age was, religion, where you came from in America. It was very much an all-encompassing group of people. There was also similarities as well with the people who, wanted to move forward the movement. Um, as in the feminist movement, we had, you know, Honorable Shirley Chisholm, the first African American woman elected in the U.S. Congress, where, according to page 25 of her feminism papers, Equal Rights for Women, she literally was the first African American woman who was promoting feminism to the House of Representatives. That's a huge deal, and it's the same thing with the LGBTQ movement. A lot of different people were speaking on behalf of that movement. Most notably, one of the city directors or city supervisors of San Francisco, Harvey Milk, one of the first openly gay city representatives, who fought hard for that movement, who unfortunately was assassinated in, I believe, 78. But again, just goes to show the drive and the pride people had for promoting that movement. Some other goals for the LGBTQ movement were, acceptance of their orientation and identity. Professor Young herself kind of described how, in the instance of, showing affection in public between a heterosexual couple was seen as normal. If there was any sort of affection between a homosexual couple, it was deemed as perverse or taboo or things like that. It wasn't until about 1969 when the Stonewall riots of New York City happened, where an NYPD unit went and did a raid, unsuspecting raid on the Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in Greenwich Village, where it really incited the protest and really pushed the momentum of the LGBTQ movement forward for the next couple of years. Unfortunately, I think that it wasn't as successful as the feminist movement, just due to the fact that at the time there was America at the time was had a very strong religious backbone to the community, or the basis of American culture, and that goes directly against, their homosexuality goes directly against the Christian mentality. So I think at that point in time, they were having a hard time getting anything done to promote their movement. And it lasted for the next couple decades. It's very apparent. You just look at the past couple years. Just last year in June did the U.S. legalize same-sex marriage? It's just an unfortunate truth that that's the case, that it took so long to get that legalized, but fortunately it did. But in the grand scheme of things, it's a very long time, as opposed to the feminist movement goals that they were trying to accomplish. So the next movement I'm going to talk about is the anti-war movement or protest movement. The main goal with the anti-war movement was trying to end the war in Vietnam. A lot of the advocates for the anti-war movement had seen the negative impact that the Vietnam War was having, with the wasteful money spending the government was using on this war, why they were at war in the first place, as far as the troops getting sent over there to what they felt like was to die, both not only their troops, the home troops, but also the troops in the host countries that were just, how they believed, were being killed for no good reason. So a lot of the tactics they tried to instill was more along the lines of peaceful protests. They protest, they got loud, they went in front of the White House to protest as well, as you'll see in these pictures. But the main thing was they were promoting peace. It was sort of where the peace, make peace not war slogan came from this era. One of the other famous things would be the flower power. As you can see in this picture, it discussed, or the protesting college-aged girl, is trying to put a flower on the military police. there to make sure, probably the National Guard, to make sure, things don't get out of hand. But the protesters trying to instill the idea that they're protesting to make peace and not war. Again, this is one of those unfortunate realities where the successes of this protest weren't as fruitful as, say, the feminist movement, due to the fact that the government at the time was very unwaverable in the sense of war. Again, just an unfortunate fact, people did lose their lives. We did not win this war, some historians would even say, at all. And it was just chalked up as a giant loss for America. But in the end, if we are to recap all the three protest movements we've looked at, personally, what I would say is the feminist movement was one of the more successful ones, just due to the fact that, very much like the LGBTQ movement, and even in some aspects the anti-war movement, it was an all-encompassing group that were trying to get the same goals across. African American feminists, male feminists, middle class white feminists, or white female feminists, were very successful in getting what they were trying to accomplish accomplished. It wasn't too far off of what was deemed as not along the lines of the American ideal, as opposed to, the LGBT community or the anti-war community. So in that aspect, I think the feminist community, or feminist movement, protest movement community, was definitely the one that got the most goals accomplished in the section of history that we're looking at. I hope you've learned something. I hope I was able to portray in a way certain things were done in the era, or in that era, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.